We're on episode 12 of The Work Item, and we have another special guest today, which is Christina Weng. Welcome, Christina.
Welcome,
Thank you,
Christina.
Dan and Courtney. Really cool to be here because I like how your podcast lets people who might not necessarily be in tech listen to all these stories and journeys that you guys are kind of exploring. So really excited to be here.
Yeah, I think that's one of our goals is to give people a perspective that maybe are outside the industry, right? And people that are aspiring to kind of get into it. And that's something that I would really love to talk to you about today is kind of what's your journey been and what would you advise people that are kind of getting on this path and getting started? So tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us kind of what you're working on right now, what's exciting you. Give us some background.
Sure. So currently I'm working as a product designer at Facebook. I work on Ads Manager Core. So I've basically just graduated as well. So I'm a class of 2020 during the pandemic, and I think I was very lucky this year. I was able to get a job before everything kind of started getting together.
That's an incredible first job to land to end up at Facebook right off the bat, though. That's like big kudos, right?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I had a lot of really good mentorship. When I was doing my Microsoft internship, so that's where I met Dan. And honestly, I looked up to him a lot because I felt like as a designer, you do end up doing a lot of PM work too. So one of the things that really helped me was one of the first pieces of advice that Dan told me from that internship was, prioritize correctly. Not prioritize correctly, but choose 3 things and let's tackle those, because I had a huge backlog of design tasks that I wanted to get done, because I feel like as a designer you learn, you want the best possible experience. But looking at the list, that was the best piece of advice I got afterwards, and I started thinking more critically through it. And I took that back with me through school as well. So
I would love to hear kind of, sorry, I think that it's great to hear about your education. So again, it's been a minute since I've been out of school. So I would love to hear kind of what's your background there? What prepared you? Do you feel like it kind of prepared you? Because I think there's a lot of people out there looking for resources. Should I go back to school? Could I just learn it on my own? What do you feel like your education did for you?
Yeah, so actually my education, I graduated from design school, but before that I was actually studying in business school. So right out of high school, I was really uncertain about what I did, and I decided on business administration from the very beginning because at that time I was really interested in marketing and figuring out how people think and being understanding how to market products to people. So that's how I kind of got started initially. And through that process, I did my first marketing internship back in the day, and I really didn't like it for a couple of reasons. I didn't like how I had to basically market a product that I felt didn't resonate with their target audience, and that confused me and it frustrated me a lot. And I got into design through mentorship as well. So my boyfriend's sister, while I was attending business school, she was studying at York Sheridan Design. And on the weekends, I would spend time at his place. So what ended up happening was I would just sit beside her and watch her kind of design. And she started teaching me things along the way about how she approached problems. She would come from it from a user perspective or from a human perspective. And that was so intriguing to me because for me, that was kind of the missing piece. And then she started encouraging me oh, maybe you should look into going into some workshops downtown that are teaching UX. So I decided to go ahead and do that in my own free time, and went to a General Assembly intro to UX design. It wasn't even called General Assembly back then. It was called something else, Bitmaker. And I fell in love with it. And then I decided I was going to tell my very Asian parents I'm going to transfer into design school. And they were shocked because they thought design was something that was art based. Oh, you had to be good at art. And looking at me, I was never into art. I'm very analytical. That's why I fell in love with systems design as well. I like seeing how things work. So I had to create a research report for them, basically telling them why UX design was like the next best
You had to
thing
pitch it to
after.
them.
Yeah, I had to get them on board.
Stakeholder buy-in, stakeholders.
Yeah, exactly. And it was a really scary thing because for them they're like, oh, we just don't want you going down a path where, there's no like career jobs. But then at the time, like I saw so many UX design job postings. I started from there. I was like, I think I'll be able to get a job if I go into this program. And I think it's something that I'll be able to be excited about. So they then allowed me to enroll in Sheridan's interaction design program, which at that point was very, very new. They only had one graduating cohort. So it was really risky to do that. But as for like the education portion of it, honestly, I like loved my time in design school. It was so different from university. I think like because I came from like an academic background where I was able to like have those study habits in place, design school really pushed me to kind of like be very project based and figure out also how to just like generally work more with people. I never had exams in design school anymore, and the education was super hands-on. So instead of spending time studying for an exam for hours, which I dreaded, it ended up turning into time that I was just like, oh, I want to spend more time on my projects. Like my first systems design class was in second year, and I I like fell in love with like that entire process of getting to know like your user and being able to get a lot of critique from my peers. So like I had never been able to like have this way of working before that isn't really present in like university learning.
Yeah, there's
So
like that.
that was
There's that whole like shared social understanding, right? You're not only working, and this is in the real world too. You're working with others to solve a problem, right? It's not necessarily just your acumen being tested all the time, which I think as you mentioned, like business school, it's very like exam driven, it's very like textbook driven, and less project based learning, right? And design by its very nature is that it's like basically you got your toolkit and you got to figure out different ways to use it. You're not always going to use the same approach that you would for like taking an exam, right? Like I think that's the exciting part about design is it's actually working with people and understanding how to work with people. And the same thing with PMing, right? And like PMing is so much a people job, like being able to interact with people, being able to understand what's important.
Yeah.
So in comparison to like the project-based learning you were doing at university or design school, and then comparing that to, you mentioned you did a boot camp, so you did actually do a boot camp before, just to kind of see like if you liked it, if you really enjoyed it, right?
So I didn't actually enroll in a boot camp. I just did like a workshop type of thing that they were offering. Like for me, okay. So before design school, I had never coded in my life before either. So I've never touched like HTML, CSS, like JavaScript. That was completely new to me. So they were teaching like how to approach UX design from like a web design perspective. And in design school, that's also where I started learning how to code and think about how engineers like approach like implementing software and things like that. So I didn't actually get the chance to attend boot camp, but I do know like a lot of people who have.
Do you think that it actually helped you? So you mentioned kind of understanding how engineers think. Do you think that actually in any way, shape, or form helped you propel your design career just by having that understanding?
Yeah, for sure. I think like this particularly helped during my time in like the garage. So a lot of the times the biggest problem that came up when I was doing my internship, and it was the first time I had ever worked with a team of software engineers as well, but because I had that education from school that taught me kind of how to implement a design using code, I was able to start thinking about, okay, if I was them, I see like this brand new UI design and they're looking at it and they're like, that looks like a lot of work. But I started breaking it down into tasks. So, okay, let's migrate this UI component over here and creating like a timeline of timeline and steps of how I would approach coding it. So that gave me like a language, and also it helped me show them like that design would look like broken down if we were to go ahead and implement it afterwards. So they were like, wait, this isn't that hard afterwards, and they just started picking up the task immediately, and it became like, oh, Christina, what's next in the design process, and wanting to then, after the UI redesign, it was just like, what about the experience itself? How do we improve that? And they became like a lot more engaged with it as well, which I like. It's like what you said, Courtney, like the collaboration and the people aspect. That was like what really empowered me to do my best work there. So yeah.
It's interesting because as a designer, like if you have a vision for a project, and even a PM, anybody working on a product or a project, it's like if you have the vision, you have to be very open to collaborating and taking in others' ideas, right? It's not just kind of bullnosing your way through and like pushing your agenda. It's actually building. It's like, okay, I have this baseline, right? Like I have this baseline, and I need you to add the drums on top of it, and I need you to add, all those percussion lines, or we're adding vocals. It's like it's more of a band than just like a one-man band, right? Like you have to be open to kind of receiving that from other people. And I think that's a learning process in of itself, because I think when I was going through school, and this is going to date me, it's like, 10 years ago, and a lot of it was focused on like the hero designer, right? Like you had to be kind of like do everything and be able to solve all the problems, and have a vision. So like keying off of, we had especially a lot of agency work, like keying off the one lead designer and kind of going off of that. It's like, yeah, that's great, but you can build a lot better things with the contributions of many, right? And smarter things. Our products are so complex today. Web products are so complex that you have to have the analytical mind, you have to have the creative mind, you have to have all of that coming together.
I think that's the deceiving part about the title when we talk about like product management. When a lot of new coming PMs, they see the title manager and they think, oh, I tell people what to do. And in reality, it's totally not the case, right? Like you're managing a product, but that requires a lot of collaboration with design, with engineering, with research, with data science. Like it's never a one-man show. Like if there's a team where somebody's acting like this kind of a one man telling people what to do, that's kind of you probably don't want to be on that team.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And it's really interesting that we're talking about this because actually in my 4th year, we had a collaboration class. So we had one in both semesters. And I found that really fascinating about why they taught designers not only how to design, because Courtney, like what you're saying is especially what I see this a lot in design projects when it's only a group of designers, it's usually one designer who's like taking the lead and going like a specific direction, and all the other designers are kind of following it. But that collaboration class taught me about how teams like work really well together, and that's why when I started reading more about how to create like more effective teams and how to empower people is creating like that environment where everyone feels like they can equally contribute and also all have psychological safety when they're like working on a team together. Because like the last thing you want is people not wanting to speak up or being afraid to speak up because they'll get shut down, or they're not sure of what to do. And what you want to do is like you want to push up your other team members as well in that regard. So that was definitely one of my classes, and I'm not sure if in your design school you had that, but I found that really, really helpful before going into the real world full time.
I think speaking on my own experience, like the field was so new, like the whole idea of like having, user experience wasn't even really coined. It was all called human computer interaction was the thing that it was called, and it was always lumped into the computer science program. Like they were totally different schools. Like the design building at my school was all the way across campus from the engineering school, which is where computer science was. So there was no idea of like user experience. Is more just about like building websites or building software was relegated to the likes of, like I said, like the software engineering group or the software engineering studies. And then websites were kind of like this new thing, right? Like back then, web apps weren't even very mature either. Like, I mean, you're talking 2006 to 2010 when like Flash websites were still a big thing. So like very rich creative experiences. A lot of the time, like again, it was bespoke. There was a lot of agency work happening. So agencies were tasked with building these software products and adding like a layer of gloss on top of them, right? And so now we've gotten to this world where, you know, not only big companies have design teams, but even very small ones. So the roles are a lot more proliferate, and they're also a lot more specialized. So you don't have just one guy happen to play the whole, you know, the whole ensemble. It's many different people doing those very tightly scoped, specialized jobs, which I think, like I said, ultimately it just leads to a better product, and we have much more mature and thoughtful products. Well, people would argue, you know, about that too. Like we have products that are taking advantage of people too, but yeah, it's very interesting to see where the field's developed, and as somebody that's looking to get into it. So I'm sure you've probably talked to your peers, but then I have people that are, you know, further along in their careers and maybe they're already doing something they're totally outside the tech sphere, but like, how could I become a designer? And I'm honestly like referring them to people like you that are fresh to the field and have just done it, because I think you're the most involved and know kind of what works. And I love the idea of having a workshop, right? Like doing a workshop just opens your eyes to what the possibilities are without being so committed to like a big, you know, a big upfront check or having to go back to school with the time commitment. So I think that's great to hear. So what workshops would you recommend? What are your peers doing, or, you know, people that you've seen break into the industry that are your age?
That's a really good question. I think it depends on like what type of designer you are as well. I don't know if you've seen it, but recently I've seen that when people are joining design school or trying to break in, they usually are more attracted to either like big tech design work, versus like agency work. I feel like there's a divide now because I think right now for a lot of early designers, the perception is that with agency work, you're allowed to be a lot more creative versus with big tech, you know, they're more um you need to like kind of deliver a certain experience in order to drive metrics. Um, so I feel like right now the way that people are getting into design. So for me, I was um, trying was curious about how people did it. So what I started doing was, and what I tell a lot of other people is to start going to hackathons as a designer, which, you know, in the design school, a lot of people looked at me and were just like, why would you go to a hackathon? Like, you barely know how to code. And my reasoning was I wanted to learn from other people. So being able to observe how software is made and try and challenge myself as well to step outside of like my own like designer box and try and get to know other people in the field as well as like network with these companies that I had never seen before. And like again, it allowed me to collaborate with a bunch of people that I never would have been able to. And and then I started wanting to tell other people at my school about how awesome hackathons were. So then I founded like a club there called Hackademics, trying to get other designers to go in. And I think it's been fairly successful now. So I feel like being able to kind of exit out of your workshop mode or like only being like a designer and trying to see like what else is out there is definitely really important, as well as for me it was also reaching out to a lot of other people, so a lot of designers who are only like a couple of years ahead of me, maybe like 3 to 5 years, and learning about them and their journeys. It was really scary doing that because I was scared that people would think I was like annoying for asking them, you know, I was just wondering how did you get started, and figuring out what their design process looked like as well as what their work looked like. That was really helpful for me to hear their stories as well as hear how they thought about problems and how they also put together their portfolio, because I feel like for designers, a lot of the work is really visual. And your first impression of like a designer is what you see on their portfolio as well. So I was really
Yeah.
fascinated by, yeah, how people put together case studies.
I was going to tell you, we had an amazing interview with Jin Yang, who's like the VP of design at Capital One, and he mentioned that his interview process, right, like his portfolio review process is like, I have like 15 seconds where I like make a decision to continue looking or not. You know, first impressions are kind of everything, and so like if they don't trigger a couple things for me, like curiosity, right, is one of them. Like, how do you optimize for that baseline, right? It's just like any other product experience. You have to think about who's your persona, what are they doing, right? So the context of, okay, I'm reviewing hundreds of candidates, and I can only spend 15 to 20 seconds on each one in deciding whether to put them in the look again pile or not. So I think you're absolutely right. You know, learning from your peers and seeing what worked, who's had success. Again, there's not like a lot of metrics on this, so it's kind of more networking and learning to ask the right questions of your peers, right? Like, hey, I saw you got your job at Google. Like, how'd that interview process go? And being genuinely curious about what different organizations are doing for their interviewing process too, because I think that there's certainly this narrative of every company is kind of optimizing for a different thing in that interview process. Can you identify what it is going in? And then you have spoken a lot about this too with me personally, like figuring out if you're going to go to a company, you need to understand what's the test you're preparing for. And I think this is great because you come from that business background where it's like exam driven. I think that the design interview is very much kind of like that, oriented that way, right?
Well, it's an important point where, and Christina, you're alluding to that with, you know, talking to peers and understanding, you know, what it takes to be in the company, talking to other designers in the field. And the beauty of the modern technology is that we have things like social media, we have Twitter, we have LinkedIn, where you're no longer constrained by geographic boundaries. You're no longer constrained by the fact that, you know, oh, I don't know anybody at company X, because I can just look them up on LinkedIn, send a message and say, hey, I'm so-and-so. I'd love to break into the field of design, product management. Do you mind if I set up, you know, 30 minutes for a call or, you know, for a coffee chat if you're somewhere nearby and we're past this whole pandemic thing. But the reality is, like, we have much more access to people now than we ever had before. And it would be a shame for somebody to not take advantage of that and just say, oh, you know, if I want to reach out to Courtney, I'll send him a message on LinkedIn and say, Courtney, I'm a designer too. I'd love to learn from your work because I see you've done amazing with, you know, docsandexcel.com. How can I do something similar? And I don't think somebody like Courtney would just, you know, flat out either reject or say, oh, no. It's like, especially for somebody coming into the field, I don't know. To me, it's always personally exciting to have people reach out and say, hey, like, I'm trying to be a new PM. I just joined this company. Can you spare, I don't know, 15 minutes to talk about it? It's like, sure, no problem. Happy to. Here's my email.
Yeah, like I think like that's even just like the first step of getting over that fear of reaching out to a lot of people who are in like your positions. Like you guys are very senior in your careers now. I at least like from my perspective. So you guys already know
We're
what
so
you're
old
doing,
now,
have
Dan.
figured it
We're so
out.
old. We're becoming old timers.
Yeah, no, I know. This is like, you're very quote unquote senior, sure.
You're elderly designer.
That's a nice way to put it.
But yeah, I feel like you guys have already kind of like figured it out, whereas like for us it's kind of like still feeling it out as you go. And actually one thing that came up to my mind when we were talking is the fact that I actually just used to put my portfolio in front of people who I admired their design work a lot and ask them to give like a 10-second scan of my work and what their first thoughts were. And I created, I think, 5 different versions of my portfolio before landing on like the one that I kind of kept and took notes about what they thought I could do better and how I could improve, as well as like what aspects of it were good. So that was something that I really appreciated people taking the time to do, because I also did that at hackathons. Like on, if it was like a 48-hour one, I would on Saturdays go around to also like different recruiters and get their eyes on it. And that's actually how I got my first internship at RBC. So that was really cool. Seeing how open people were to just like looking at the work and seeing how much better it could be and how to optimize it.
And I think that kind of gets to also an important point where especially early on in the career, like feedback is critical. You have to have feedback from people that are around you. You have to have feedback from people that you work with. You can't work, and again, to your original point of, if you would have worked in isolation just by yourself in an office, just like shelling out new designs left and right, well, sure, you might learn some things, but you're not going to learn as well as if you're actually putting designs in front of people and saying, tell me what you think of this. How can I make this better? Because there's a lot of people around myself, around you, around Courtney, that have way more experience than we have combined. And to me, growth always comes with feedback. Like you can't nullify the effect of feedback. You can't go without feedback.
And failing. I mean, I think an important part of my development has been I did do freelance work, and I did try to run my own business, right, and do basically an agency model and work with clients of varying different business backgrounds. And I think that built a lot of skills as far as like social acumen to like go up to people and just tell them the value of design, right, and having to sell that cold turkey. Like you're not inside a big organization where that's already been decided for you. It's like literally you have to walk up to this motorcycle shop and tell them why they need a website and they're going to need an e-commerce solution, right, for parts or whatever. Like that type of conversation with people that don't know your world builds a lot of skill in talking about design in a layman's terms, because I think there's a lot of there's so much lingo thrown around in our daily jobs, and I honestly it's like tiring to deal with it. It's like, come on, let's just get to the point. Like we're talking, you're just beating the bush. Like let's go ahead and talk about what the real goal here is. But like running your own business, or I had a chance to run 2 different Kickstarters with other people they weren't originally my ideas. They were just helping other people kind of envision their ideas. Those types of projects are like liberating, and you learn a lot from them. You learn a lot from failure too, right? Like one of the Kickstarters was it wasn't a complete failure, but it was a failure, and you learn from it and you move on and you say, you can kind of reflect on it, but you still have something to show, right? You still have a story to tell. I think those types of stories are really compelling, both to talk to other designers, but then even just when you go in for an interview, because it's such a cop out, right? Like to go into an interview and be like, oh, I've never had any failures. Like I want to know about your
that would be a red flag. If somebody that you come into an interview and they never failed, that's even to the smallest extent, like everyone failed at something. It's like everyone like did something that you're like, oh, that was a learning opportunity. And it's not, this is where I think that there's the perceived idea of failure as a bad thing versus failure as a learning experience. And a lot of times we can even not necessarily point to something as a failure versus, oh, my project, the deadline slipped because I forgot to account for something, or I forgot for the fact that, there was this other stakeholder that needed to be a part of it, and they didn't know, so there's a bunch of new requirements that came in late. Like that happens to everyone. I don't like if you interview somebody and they come in and be like, I have never failed, everything went perfectly every single time that I did it. Like, sounds like a lie.
You get into these conversations where it's like an interview phase, and these people, you're automatically trying to put your best self out there, but can they be vulnerable? You're not trying to make them feel uncomfortable, but you're also trying to understand how do they process pain and failure, right? Like from a project, and like, can they respond to that in a working? Because like I said, it's so much of it is people and relational. And how do you work through setbacks? How do you move forward from a failure? Like resiliency is really important to me in like a project team, because there's going to be projects that maybe it's like really experimental, it's cutting edge, and you're excited about it and you're passionate about it, and then it goes out there and it's not what you expected. Users don't receive it well, or it performs really poorly, and you were championing it inside your org, and that can kind of make you feel bad when people say, hey, that was Courtney's idea and it didn't really work out the way that he was selling it. So yeah, like there's a level of maturity there with like the design. It's not only critique, but it's also just like vulnerability and being able to be okay with being wrong sometimes.
Sometimes.
Sometimes. Yeah. So what are you excited about right now? What are you actively kind of working on? And obviously you're working at Facebook and you have that going on for you. Do you have any fun side projects? Or are you doing anything? It doesn't even have to be tech related. Stuff that's getting you excited.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, the exciting part right now is trying to figure out how my life is going to be laid out because we're also during the pandemic. So I'm honestly kind of on survival mode still, which sounds a little bit weird, but for me, like onboarding remotely has been a little bit overwhelming since it is in the ad space. So that I've been trying to read more up on it, like on the weekends, and trying to get like to know the space a bit more because I think the other thing about being a designer that I found really fascinating was designing for people who weren't me and learning from their experiences too. So in my spare time I've been trying to do that as well as like figure out what hobbies look like now because I think from being in school all I was like kind of a workaholic so I didn't really have a life outside of trying to push my projects to be better. So I'm trying to figure out what work-life balance looks like right now, especially since I'm like glued to my desk like 24/7. I'm literally physically fighting the urge to open up my work laptop and continue to just look at what's going on. Do you guys have any tips on work-life balance and figuring what that looks like as well. I'm sorry for like changing the topic, but I was just
No,
curious
No.
because I'm trying
great
to
segment.
balance
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, it's actually a fun topic because it's also a very, it's I have this kind of I read a tweet recently where we're not working remotely right now. We're working from home during a pandemic, which is not the same as your typical remote work lifestyle. I'll actually, I'm curious what Courtney thinks about work-life balance, since he's worked remotely way longer than I have, and I'll chip in as well.
Yeah, I have a lot of feelings on this because it's like personally impacted me a ton with the pandemic going on. So I've been working remote for almost 9 years now. It's going to be 10 this next year, but this year's just so different. I have everything I could ever want in an office space. I have a dedicated office space. I have all the equipment I could ever want. I have all the ergonomic things, right? I'm like fully equipped. There's no reason I wouldn't be comfortable. But there's something about a regular cadence of like socially interacting. Like I've always had the luxury to travel on site and be with my team or meet up with my team like in a, every 3 month cadence usually, or even more frequently. And those flashpoints as a remote employee are incredibly vital to the fabric of like your attachedness to your team. And I can't really say it any other way. It's like that checking in point is a string. It's like a marker, and it gives you energy to continue to the next one. You can wander in the woods, but you got to come back to that signpost occasionally and that meeting point for everybody. And so I think not having those opportunities has like really affected me socially. Like I feel kind of starved for just being in the same room with people, being there with a lot of energy. And the same thing, it impacts your like energy when you bring it to the projects because it feels like it's just honestly, it feels like it's one massive project that's just been going on and on and on. And you only see each other in a video format. So that's been like mentally really hard to deal with. And I consider myself an extrovert, right? So like being in the presence of other people is really important. And then you don't have your usual coping mechanisms. I mean, you can't go have a really nice dinner in your under normal circumstances, or go out with your friends to large gatherings, right? It's so different, and your coping manners have changed. Um, I would say a couple tips for people that are going through that. So things that I've been trying to do, I've been literally just trying to get off my property. So get out of your apartment, get out of your house. Like, yes, you are working maybe at your house full time because there's not a good place with internet, or you have your whole setup. That's how I am. I'm very picky, so I want to be at my office. But there's no reason I have to be here after 5 p.m. Like I can go to a gym now, the gyms are open, or I can go walk a trail. I can take whatever it is, go ride a bike. Whatever your hobby is, maybe you can take it somewhere else and find just a different setting to put your whole mind and your body in. And then the other big one for me has been my walks. So being able to go out in the mornings or in the afternoons and walk and be in nature. There's something about that. Like we're looking at screens all day. it kills us. Like I feel like it takes part of our soul slowly over time. Go out and be in nature because it makes you just, I don't know, reconnect. That's it. I mean, pretty simple, but you got to be mindful of it, right? Because like you said, there's a gravity. If you're just like, oh, I'm done, I'm gonna like I haven't played video games in months. I've played a couple times with Den. I'm very like planned sessions, but yeah, I can't bring myself to like look at a screen right now longer than my workday.
Yeah, for sure. I think I'll echo the sentiment. So for one, I'm just like Courtney in that I'm not one of those people that can work like at a coffee shop or at a library. Like I need my setup. I need my 3 screens. I need my webcam. I need my mechanical keyboard, the good mouse, the speakers that I like. So to that regard, work-wise, I haven't found a way to like go somewhere else and work somewhere else. Like that's not a thing for me. The part about kind of having strict boundaries, and I think that kind of ties into every person's need to define those, right? And to me, that means like at 5:30, I try to be good about it. Like sometimes, obviously, there's work past those hours when certain deadlines hit, but generally at like 5:30, that's the cutoff. I close the laptop. Funnily enough, I have a like the switch that connects all my keyboard and mouse, everything via like a USB plug to my work laptop, and I just unplug it and plug it into my personal one. And that's it. I can't see work email. I can't see work notifications, nothing. So until the next morning, I will literally not know about what's going on. And I think that's an important boundary to have. The other one is I never install work-related stuff on my phone. So the people cannot, I can't just look at the email during non-work hours or get like notifications when people ping me on Slack or something about certain things. Because again, unless it's urgent, then people that need to reach me will reach me by my phone. People know my phone number if it's truly urgent. If it's not urgent, that means I can get it in the morning. And I actually, funnily enough, put together a document that I got inspired by our good friend Isaac Hepworth. And Courtney, you probably know him. He works on the Azure side of things. But he had this document. He called it "How I Work," and that document kind of outlines these work principles of, I don't respond to emails after certain hours. Here's my work day starts at 8:30, finishes at this hour, and I kind of did the same thing for me. And it acts as, I want to say, like almost like a forcing function where I have to commit to following the things that I wrote down and I publicly said to people that this is how I work. So that people cannot say, hey, Dan, you're a hypocrite. Look at, you say you're working this way, but you're actually not. So that worked for me. And I think that, to what Courtney said, it really does help to just not be on your screen all the time. Like going on walks, to me personally, like I have a forcing function. I have to walk my dog. And, I have to go outside. And it's very easy sometimes to be like, oh, I'll go outside and I'll listen to a podcast or something. I refuse to even do that sometimes. Like, you know what? Like, forget it. I'll just walk. I'll just literally walk and listen to whatever's around me. And that helped. I don't think short of, not to sound cliche, but to an extent, it comes down to like willpower and just practice. Practice in that once you shut off the laptop, you close it, that's it. Like, just don't touch it. It sounds very like easy in words. Like, well, yeah, of course, just close it down. But that worked for me.
Christina, how have you been handling this? What have your little tips and tricks been that have found work for you?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was like, right now, I think because I haven't physically relocated as well, I have been trying to set up boundaries. So spending more time with family while I'm still able to be in Canada before I have to ship myself off to the States. So being really open with my team about, these certain days in the evenings, especially because I'm working from the East Coast when everyone's working on the West Coast, that's been a challenge. Telling them, 5 p.m. for me is their 2 p.m. So letting them know, like I want to get to this meeting, but just on certain days, I can be flexible, but not being available during that time. And also figuring out how to prioritize. So, today I'm going to work on these 3 tasks and get them finished. And that's what I'm committing to. If I can't get to the other thing, then I'll like move it to my other task list. And I guess like what I was thinking about when I was hearing both of your answers, which I found really fascinating, how you're able to kind of just like turn it off and start going about like your own lives. The question that came up for me was, and that I'm having difficulty with, is like building domain knowledge. So I know both of you work on really complex projects, like, how did you guys like feel comfortable enough like not knowing everything? Because I feel like as like a new grad, um, I'm trying to focus on how do I contribute to the like impact of my team and maximize like that potential and feel comfortable with not knowing everything or not having an answer for everything, because I feel like every single time it's just me having more questions than I do answers. So I spend my time like just trying to read up on information to make up for the lack of domain knowledge I have. Do you guys think that you're able to kind of unplug from like that because you guys have already built like that domain knowledge, or what is it that enables you guys to just like turn off that part of your brain?
Yeah, no, that's one where, I'm one of those people. It's funny because I talk to my wife about it all the time. We're like, I just love working on projects. I love working on projects, whether it's work related, not work related. To me, it's always like I love learning new things constantly. Like it's just how I'm wired. To that extent, I think, um, the one thing that I want to call out is like it's fantastic that you mentioned that you do is you ask a lot of questions. Like to me, if I work with somebody who never asks any questions and just kind of like, yeah, I know everything, I know, like that's I don't want to say like a red flag, but probably like, there's like some warning signs there, because like, is it truly that this person just knows 100% of everything and never asks a single question? So I think asking questions is a good start, right? Like to build that domain knowledge, you have to ask questions. I don't think there's ever going to be a time when I can say that I know everything absolutely and I'm the only expert that knows like from A to Z. We're working in technology. The field changes daily. I don't think either of us are prepared to say, yeah, by the end of 2020, I'll be the absolute expert in this technology X or technology Y or whatever that might be. It's always changing. So you can't you can put a limit and say, okay, I've had enough domain knowledge, because the domain knowledge evolves itself. So to me, in that regard, I always try to work on things that help me expand that domain knowledge. So, right. So like during the day, I want to work on things that help me grow and make sure that I'm not doing like mundane tasks or, updating Jira tickets or something like that. Right. Like I would much rather be like knee deep in code and user research, talking to customers. So that way you're kind of making your job also the thing that expands your skills. You're combining the two because you're spending 8 hours of your day at least doing that stuff. Why not make sure that that helps you grow? And short of that is just a matter of, being able to experiment on your own time sometimes for things that you enjoy. So you're talking about hobbies, for example. For me, I fiddle with things that are completely unrelated to my job, where right now I'm like reverse engineering a USB LED light. Totally irrelevant to my job, totally irrelevant to my future career prospects, but it's fun. And carving out time for that, I think, helps. I spend time reading on topics that interest me. That's another thing that I do to kind of expand my horizons and just kind of try to carve out at least some time during the week in the morning or in the evening. Courtney, what do you think? What works for you to expand the domain knowledge outside of your work hours or during work hours?
So back to that, I'll get to that in a second, but I think Christina, you brought up a great point about like having questions all the time. And like I always tell people like I am the lowest common denominator, so I am designing for myself. Like I don't sometimes I go into projects I have no idea what the hell's going on, and I'm just like, all right, I'm a kid in a candy shop, and I'm just gonna like start grabbing things, and somebody's gonna slap me on the wrist, like somebody's gonna stop me at some point. But keeping like my notes app and my Notion are a freaking mess. Like I tell you what, I have just notes everywhere. Like as soon as I think of something, I'll jot it down. I have all these pieces of paper next to me that's just like little little notes, like, and they end up becoming ethereal. Like, they don't really matter. They're just kind of like brain captures, and I throw them away after a while. But that, I don't know, that process for me is like how my brain works. Like, I just need to put it down somewhere, and I might come back to it. I might not. There's a lot of times that these questions get answered in natural conversation with an engineer or a PM or whatever. But yeah, I think you got to capture those questions somewhere versus trying to do it, trying to be proactive and like reading up on everything. I kind of fell into that trap early in my career where it's like, I don't know enough about the subject area. I'm going to read everything, but some of the stuff I read wasn't relevant. It didn't end up becoming relevant at all to the project. So I wasted time, right? Like, I spent time focusing on the wrong things, or I spent time reading up on the wrong things that didn't really ultimately impact what I was working on. So I think there's a little bit of balance of that. And then obviously lean on your peers. I'm a big, like, let's get into a call, or I'm going to leave these notes async. And if you have an answer, just type back here really, real quickly. It doesn't have to be super thorough, but these are the questions I have. Send them a message. Maybe they answer them, maybe they don't. That's a great process. And then if there's any sort of internal way to capture that, right? Like Stack Overflow. I worked at Stack Overflow. We had an internal Stack Overflow instance, and people would ask questions there. So like, think about, is the question I'm asking something that would be valuable to other people? And could I make content out of it? This is something that Den does. You mentioned the other day, Den, that you found an article from yourself in college where you were trying to solve a problem and you wrote it down. I think that's an awesome way to kind of just get in the practice of, writing down your thoughts. And then if you come up with a solution, put it out there. So yeah, you might have a question that 3 other designers will eventually have that onboard into the team. It's great for onboarding too, right? When you come into a subject area and it's kind of an established area inside the product team, it's like, I made some notes about this when I started onboarding, and this is how we can improve that process, right? Now that I've been here for a year, I can look back and think of ways that we can address that. But you might not have that insight for a while, and it's okay to sit on those questions. And then as far as Den, you mentioned like doing things outside of work, and to stay like up to date on the domain. Really, honestly, like Twitter is my lifeblood. So like my Twitter is basically all pretty much professional. I use it for that purpose. It's a networking tool. Try to stay on top of tech, and then yeah, I do fun little projects on the side. Like right now, I'm building a Hackintosh just because somebody asked me to. So I'm diving back into something that I had done years and years ago, and I'm trying to learn some new things. So yeah, that's it.
So Christina, how about yourself? How are you learning new things, or how are you expanding your knowledge in design outside of work, I guess, or maybe during work? I don't know.
I think for me, I think for one of my hobbies right now, I have been getting into more like mechanical keyboards, so figuring out how to assemble those, and I'm going to try and challenge myself to like put one together myself.
Yes,
I don't know.
Finally.
Yeah, I
another person that I know that does that.
Yeah, I love buying like just like I started out with keycaps, but then I went down this rabbit hole of figuring out, oh my god, there's like a custom keyboard that you could put together. So I've been really into that recently. I'm gonna try and assemble one. And in terms of like design knowledge, I think having conversations with other people has been really, really helpful. And Courtney, I like how you said that, use me as lowest common denominator, because I always do that, and I didn't realize like that was a thing. But I guess it does make a lot of sense, because like I even remember during my Microsoft internship, we were working on developer tools, and I had no idea what we were working on. And looking at like the UI and all the copy and everything, it was so confusing to me. So the way that our team approached it was, okay, if Christina can understand it, then we can ship it.
It's like, I don't want to, yeah, as a designer, I don't want to be a power user profile, right? Like, I don't want to be that person, because if a power user is designing it, it's going to be hard for people to use.
Yeah, exactly. It was a tool. It was to help introduce Azure to students as well, which was like a secondary goal of our project. And yeah, they're like introducing more variables from all these sophisticated controls and everything, advanced settings that all these power users wanted. But as a student, if you're trying to onboard onto Azure for the first time, you don't really know what's going on, and you have like other products like, you know, Amazon Web Services as like a base, or like maybe you never even touched cloud services before. So it was really funny being able to just sit down with everyone and talk about it in like a really like layman's terms way, as you guys have like talked about it before. So for me, it's been like also just talking to other designers and at work and trying to get them to explain it in layman's terms to me again, so that I can start comprehending, okay, this is like what we're doing. Since like I think it's what was a really interesting point that you guys like brought up was how you don't want to spend your time just proactively reading up on work that might not even be relevant. So being very more like strategic about it and figuring out, okay, what pieces of information am I missing, like doing an audit of that, and then figuring out, okay, this is like kind of like the tactical action step that I can go ahead and like reinforce like what that knowledge was. And for me, it's also just been continuing to go through people's like LinkedIn profiles and just see like what other people are working on, and seeing like, I don't know, you guys are making me really want to be on Twitter right now too. I haven't been on it in so long, since like my middle school days, but I feel like I've heard that Twitter has a huge design community, so maybe that's something that I would look into like embedding myself into more, and then just reading like Medium articles as well. Like I love reading about UX problems that designers have been trying to solve, and then also keeping up with like what's happening in the tech industry, like, you know, Oracle acquiring TikTok. I thought that was crazy, because why? Yeah.
Yeah, so, 2020, like scratching my head continues. Like,
yeah, but you know, like it's an interesting thing though. You called out that I love reading people's personal blogs. This is something that I think it's slightly underrated in 2020 when we have social media, Twitter, Facebook. But I just love finding like little gems. If you go to like, say like Courtney's website, it'd be like, oh my gosh, Courtney has a website. Like, let me see what he did. Let me look at his portfolio and see that kind of stuff. Like, it just, I don't know. It's so, I don't know if I'm too old school for that, but to me, it's like, I just love personal websites. And I set up my RSS reader, which also like, who uses RSS nowadays? Just to be able to track of when people post like a new blog post or they updated their about page or something.
It's wild to me because I think your personal website is like the most powerful tool you have really to do what you want on the web. Because yeah, like there's a lot of places that can distribute, but your website is like yours. You can do, and there's like the sky's the limit. So for builders, it's great, right? For craftspeople, or you know, we all three of us are kind of interested in that. It's just a great place to tinker and be like your space that nobody else controls and nobody owns, like but you. So. Yeah, I mean, I guess I always love to
on it, and like the marquee elements that I had like in the old like MySpace days, you know, it's like just or like a wavy text, like Clipart style wavy text, just or a song that starts playing when you come to my website.
Full page takeover.
Reminds me of like Tumblr.
Oh yeah, exactly. When you go to like some random page and it's all like the background is this giant GIF from some like movie or something, and yeah, it's fantastic.
There was a phase there where they like people would have like these flash humans walk out from like the bottom corner of the website.
Oh,
you remember that? Where it was like on transparent background and they'd have like it'd be like a person walking out and they'd like turn around and they'd be like, oh hi, and then they'd start like a little text bubble would come up and be like, oh my gosh.
That was before the modern like this little chat bot icon that pops up on every website that you go to now. It's like, do you need some help? Like, no, I literally came to your site like a minute ago.
I think I remember doing like a Silverlight project for a client that wanted that. Like we had to take the person and they were on a green screen and we had to cut them out in the alpha layer. Like it's just nuts to think about where the web, like we went from like things like that were like kind of wacky and crazy to like, I don't know. Some things have gotten modularized.
Honestly, yeah. Like for those Flash games, they had like the stupid little games where, you know, you have to like how far you can like, was it like toss the monkey or something like that, where you have to like go whack it or something.
all those concepts got turned into iPhone apps.
Yeah,
like
that's
iPhone
true.
games, right?
There's probably an iPhone app for it now.
Yeah, I've seen like ever since iOS 14 rolled out, I've seen so many people doing amazing like iOS home screens on like their phone now since it's completely customizable and showing me like
That's
all
so
these
funny
different
to me.
apps. Yeah, I'm just like, dang, that's like another level of customization that I didn't know I needed, but now I want to do it.
See, that's
Yeah.
one of the core principles of both PM and design. Never ask customers what they want, translate or to what they actually need, right? And this shows you that Apple is actually pretty freaking good at that, because probably if you ask people, it's like, do you need these widgets? They'd be like, I don't know, I don't care about it. But once you start seeing the creativity of people, like, I don't know, Twitter is another example where I saw that, like the trend of iOS 14, like home screens, and the stuff that people do is just, I just pinned a bunch of icons and they were like, oh no, I have this like complex system for organizing a bunch of stuff that flips back and forth. Like, wow.
Yeah, like I think it's really fascinating as well that you called out that users don't always know what they want, because I think like the other thing that I really valued from my education was being able to like participate also in UX research and know how to like execute it myself. Because one of the things that I didn't realize that if you were a designer, this is like kind of your superpower is looking at being able to like take quantitative and qualitative data and translate it into like a great experience. Because I was reading a case study about like, Facebook reactions as well and how that came about. Like no one wanted that. Like if you ask them, do you want
Yeah,
like these faces showing up on when you want to like
there was
something? Like,
such
yeah.
a backlash against that.
Hmm. Yeah, and but now everyone's using it. I don't think I've ever seen another social media like company where you can like or react to things that doesn't have that feature anymore. So it's really interesting how those concepts are extrapolated in design.
Yeah, no, and like you said, it's a it's also an ever evolving field, right? So the things that we think that customers need today doesn't necessarily represent what customers need tomorrow or in a year. And there's always room for innovation, and you just come up with new ideas, try them out, and see what sticks. Because there's for every one of those reactions, there's 1,000 ideas that probably didn't stick with customers, but there's something that actually did. So with that, I know we're getting slightly at time, and this has been so fun that we actually time flew, and I didn't realize we're almost at the hour. So Christina, where can people find you if somebody wants to connect with you online? Where do they go?
Yeah, for me, the best place would probably be sending me like a message on LinkedIn. I'm really open. Like I've been spending my time like just talking to people trying to break into design who maybe want some tips on like interviewing for tech companies. Like very open to connecting on LinkedIn, as well as like my website, ChristinaWeng.com. My last name is a bit weird. It's not with an A, so it's Weng. And that's probably the best places where people can find me.
Excellent. And we'll make sure to include it in the show notes and as an overlay so people actually know exactly where to go. And Christina, thank you so much for being here and sharing your experiences. I think it's super valuable. And I personally learn a lot from you. And it's always so fun to have these conversations to see how people break into careers, because it's been a while for myself. And it's a good reminder that it's kind of our responsibility to help others grow as well.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Dan and Courtney. It was really fun.
Thank you for your time, Christina.
Cool. Thanks, folks. Until the next episode.